Bhekinkosi podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to yet another episode of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Bhekinkosi Moyo, the Director of the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment at the Wits Business School. I'm very excited today to be joined by, I want to introduce you differently, Dr. Judy Dlamini. I use Dr. because of so many people, you are probably one of the few with a medical degree as well as a doctorate. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Thanks. It's an honor to be here, Big.
Thank you so much. I was actually saying to the team, we are so excited to talk to you because not only are you the Chancellor of the University, and we're going to talk about that, but you have had a very illustrious career, and somewhere you have defined yourself as a girl who had big dreams. And every decade has been a decade of learning. We'll come to that. I'm just being taken away. I want to introduce you formally. Judy Dlamini is a businesswoman. She's also the Chancellor of Wits University. She served on several boards. She still serves on many others, and if we do have time, we'll cover some of those. But just to cover a few of those boards that she has served on, she's the former chairperson of Aspen Pharmacare. She also was a non-executive director of Aspen Pharmacare. She's the co-founder, sponsor, and trustee of Kiwa Trust, founder of the Female Academic Leadership Fellowship, founder of the Sfiso Community Trust, founder of the Future Nation Schools, among other enterprises that you have set. Let's start with your early childhood. You described in one of the lectures that you gave that you blamed your parents for probably what you have become. And you described it as a child with big dreams. Maybe let's start there. How was it growing up in a white neighborhood, surrounded by people who looked like you, but those people who looked like you were not what you wanted to be? Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, it was an interesting childhood, Becky, because wherever in my at my home, my dad, my mother, they were very ambitious. They were hardworking, and they never saw themselves as less than anyone. And they always made me feel very special, you know. And they had big dreams for me, and I also had big dreams for myself. But when you left the house and looked around, you actually saw people who looked like you, tending someone's garden, a housekeeper, and they're just these pictures that will always stay with me. You'd actually see the madam, a white lady with a dog in the front seat, and someone wearing a maid's uniform at the back. That worried me because I wanted to be the person driving that car, and I didn't want the dog at the front seat, but someone else, and then the dog at the back. You know what I'm saying? So the picture was wrong, but that was not the only thing. The other thing was that during those days, you actually had bus stops. The one that had a cover would be written European only, and then there would be just a board. And so if it rained, the non-Europeans would be standing there. You actually saw hotels where there would be an entrance at the back for non-Europeans. So everything, every day said you are less. And as a child, it didn't make sense because I was raised to believe I'm equal to any person. You know, so there was a disconnect. So I had anger. I had anger at the system, because I wanted, and my anger is always channeled positively. Even when I have grief or pain, I find an outlet that is positive to deal with it. So my anger was that I'm going to be a doctor, and there's the story I always tell, the doctor that
in fact, I wanted to say, enter this Dr. Medical
Dr.
Enter him, you see him in the picture. I think you saw him driving And
No, he came to the house.
He came to the house.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe let's talk about the role of somebody who could influence somebody to actually make a key decision. So role of modeling. I think that's important. So as I was listening to some of the stuff that you were saying in one of your lectures, it seemed that when you actually saw that doctor, that was probably one of the key moments in that decade. So that was your first decade.
Yeah, first decade of life.
Yeah.
I was 4. You know, it has influenced a lot of things that I do, because I learned from there that you don't have to be mentored directly. Role modeling is very important. Even the books I write are intended to tell the person from the book that you can be, you know, by looking at someone who looks like you and looking at their journey and say, I can do it. So yeah, Dr. Kabashe made me believe I can be a medical doctor, and I was clear in my mind, I'm going to be a medical doctor.
Right.
And then as a teenager, I went to a graduation ceremony, and again, I saw someone receiving a PhD. And I was like, oh, okay, that seems bigger than this, so I must have both.
Which is why I actually say doctor, because you then got both. So now we go to the practice. You study medicine, you practice, but quickly or at some point you lose passion. You have said somewhere that it was partly because of crime, but you will also have an opportunity to tell the other reasons that led to that loss of passion when you were actually serving. Medical doctors really serve humanity, which is a philanthropy of its own. Maybe we can spend a bit of time talking about that period of your life as a medical doctor leading up to the loss of the passion.
Yeah, it was a privilege. It was a privilege and an honor. Actually, I think it's the best thing I ever did. In terms of how fulfilling it was, you know, like you became part of the community. So going to my practice was like going to my extended family. And, you know, I had special rates for pensioners, and some you would treat for free because you realize just the need and the money that you were charging they couldn't afford. And also, you know, you looked at the need in the community that you are serving. So sometimes I would bring clothes that people can choose from. So it felt like I'm serving a purpose, you know. And sometimes you'd have students from the high school students. They were not sick. They just came to talk to you about, so what did you do? And it was very fulfilling. And of course, the challenging aspect is that I was fulfilled at a human side of things, but what I found frustrating was that the intellectual side was not as fulfilled, because if you actually work at a hospital and you find a case that needs to be investigated, doing the investigations, making the diagnosis, discussing with other doctors is what actually stimulates you intellectually. And that wasn't there because I wasn't within other doctors like the consultants that I could share the knowledge with and also learn from them. So I guess when that happened, it was like, okay, let me do something else.
But you also say crime played a role. I know that there was an incident that happened to you as you were, I think you were
getting out of the
practice, yes. And I think that's probably, you know, it's so unfortunate that even today, as we are speaking, the levels of crime have actually gone even much higher. It's really a pandemic that the society is actually facing, and in this case, it manifests itself even with the higher levels of gender-based violence. And I know that you care a lot about women empowerment, which is really what your writings, most of them, focus on. And we'll get to that. But I wanted us to potentially maybe talk a bit about that incident and how it propels you to maybe almost consider these other things that are lacking into taking another step, which then gets us into the decision to go into business.
You know, I watched my parents growing up, and they were hustlers, you know. They had incomes from different things. My dad had a tuck shop that was during the weekend. My mother did some sewing to sell during the weekends, but she was also a teacher. So I knew at a very young age that one, I wanted to be financially independent. And I understood that would take different streams of income for you to be able to achieve that. So even when I had the practice, my husband and I started a bakery next door.
Yeah.
So in this particular day, and it was before we had the facility to get the security company to take the cashings and to bank them. I was doing it myself. My husband and I have always been very hardworking. So it happened that this Friday, I took the takings from the bakery next door, and I thought I would have a chance to go to town because I use Fridays to take about 3 hours to fetch my kids, go and eat out, and then come back. But this Friday I became very busy and I couldn't, and there was money in the car. So as I came out, apparently there was an order for the car from an Indian guy from Chatsworth, as we later discovered. But then there were these young people, they took out guns and they called you names, they took my ring and they took the car. And you can always replace things.
Yeah.
But you just felt so violated. There was these kids, 3 of them, that called you names you've never been called. It's funny, of all the things that I lost, that's the only thing. I felt so violated, you know. And it affected me because it was dark, so I didn't see their faces. So whenever a young boy walked in, I didn't know, is it this guy? Is it not that guy? And then they harassed me after that. It just became unbearable. So I had to sell the practice in the township and also sell the house. And we moved to a suburb in La Lucia. I had a practice in town. And talk about something that is not stimulating at all. The community that I belonged to wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was just people from office who really didn't need my help as much.
Yeah.
Because in the township, you got to see advanced disease because people didn't have money and they didn't understand their bodies as well.
Yeah.
So you actually felt you're making a difference. You refer them to hospital, they come back, and there was that trust that developed. Sometimes you would be away, get a locum, and as a result, some would come in and say, she's not here. I remember one lady said, you know what, when I come to you, it's because I want to come to you.
Yeah.
I have an option to go to Dr. Mashalaba, that doctor.
Right.
So, but then you also need some time out. But the trust that develops, you'll find that someone will go to another doctor in another province and they'll call you and say, I have this ailment, they gave me this, is it okay?
Is it okay, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Some validation
so
of some sort.
I know, you know, so as I say, it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
You know, and it really was a privilege to serve.
And then enter the MBA.
Yeah.
How was that?
So, this happens now. I have a practice in town, and you know, when you have your quality time with yourself, like it's when you're driving home. When I drove home from my practice in Mlazi, I felt good.
Yeah.
I felt I was serving a purpose. Each time I drove home from my practice in town, it was like, is this it? Is this why I'm on earth? I wasn't serving a purpose in my view. And I knew I always wanted to get into business. We're in business already with the bakery.
Yes.
And I was like, you know, I need to have a qualification so that I go into this thing with as much resources as possible, you know. So I started, even before we moved to Joburg, I started with UNISA and I did my first year MBL. But then my husband got a job in Pretoria, so we had to relocate to Johannesburg. And for me, that was great because then I sold the practice in town and I got into the MBA at Wits. So it was quite educational, you know.
Yeah.
It was a mixed class, obviously, mainly white. I'd never studied with whites in the past. And I also had a practice in the township. I had always been with people who looked like me. And this was 98, so it was just post-independence. And as you know, with the MBA, there are case studies, but there's also a lot of engagement amongst yourselves. And it was just so interesting in a funny way that we had very different views about 1994, and we saw the country very differently. And it was an eye-opener for me just how divided as society we are and the different aspirations that we have across race. So it was very interesting. And I actually took it upon myself that we have to change the status quo individually and collectively, because as a nation, you actually get respect by doing things with integrity and achieving greatness, you know, if you like. Whether it is starting a company, empowering people within that company, or actually giving back to make sure that our kids are well educated from the best universities in the country. So incidentally, my husband and I had started, even before we started Nkiwa Trust, even while we were in the township, because my practice did well, Sizwe did well, and we knew that this is not for us. We are passionate about an African being respected in the world. And how do you achieve that? By educating all those that have potential but haven't got the resources to do that. So we offered bursaries, and I'm very shy. And I think the MBA helped me in a way because it forced you to talk, to be out there. So Sizwe would go to school to talk about his profession, and each time they asked me to talk about medicine, I would refer them to a Dr. Mashala, but she since passed on because she was very, you know, eloquent, and she wasn't shy like myself, but obviously that changed. So when it changed, I realized how important it is for us to be visible to a child in the township, in the rural areas, to make it possible just by being visible, you know.
At that time though, did you, and I want to go back to some of the stuff that you said, where you would at times do things for free, subsidize, and now you're talking about bursaries, and also the idea that we need to empower an African to be actually respected globally. At that time, did you have a definition of what you were doing? Did you call it what we call it today, philanthropy?
No, not at all. You see, this term is very foreign to Africans. You'll talk to any African in the continent, not just here. The things that we do as Africans are not called philanthropy. You know, people who have nothing in the rural areas, if the neighbor doesn't have sugar, she goes to the neighbor, and it's a non-issue. You know, so no, we didn't. We just felt when you have, you give. When you learn, you teach. That's how we were raised, and that's what we do. You know,
and that's probably part of the reasons why we set up a center on philanthropy, because, you know, on the one hand, we need to document some of these experiences, both in a written format but also in a storytelling, but also to elevate them to the level where elsewhere they've actually been classified as philanthropy and measured, even including the contribution that they make to the fiscus, to the GDP, among others. And yet ours is not measured, is not counted. And I think that's, you know, as I'm listening to you and many others, I see that there's just so many of these untold stories. We have always been philanthropic. So there's never been a doubt that we're philanthropic. We have always, and we'll come back to some of your philanthropy work. But I wanted to maybe pivot a bit to one theme that seems to have stayed with you, which is education. I realized that last year you and your husband became qualified teachers. Can we talk about that? Because are you pivoting to teaching?
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of things. When we had our kids, one of the things, we looked around for a school that will validate them for who they are.
Yeah.
And we couldn't find that. And what do I mean by that? You know, we took them to the best private schools that money could buy, but they had to assimilate to a culture that they don't understand. They had to disown what they knew as who they are,
Yeah.
right? Which is sad. And but you see, it doesn't help to be sad. It doesn't help to fight people in their space. What does help is to do something about it. So Sizwe and I decided, you know what? We will found a school that will celebrate who you are. And you know, they talk about hair, this, hair, the other. It becomes such a big thing. And who are they to tell you how your hair should look?
Yeah.
And are we really our hair?
No.
We're not. We celebrate who we are by the styles that we do that makes you who you are. And you want to allow the young people to be just that. Because when you do that, you validate their Africanness. So that's what is Future Nation Schools is about. But it's interesting, Bheki, because though we had this, we're pursuing our careers, we're doing a lot of other things. And one of the things that made us stop was the loss of our son in 2012. And our son was very pro-education. And it's funny because he loved fun. He's a Wits graduate, by the way. He loved having fun, but he was also starting a company called Africa Rising. And they were looking at education, especially in the townships, because they were very concerned that, you know, we come from, they are cheese boys. They come from these fancy schools, but the people that look like us are not getting the education that we got. So when he passed on, we felt we need to celebrate him by having a school. And initially we thought we would donate a school. And obviously we are from KZN, so we went to KZN and spoke to the minister at the time, the MEC, Senzo Mchunu. And we assisted, tried to do that, but it didn't work. But already we had done so much research that we said, okay, fine, we will start the school ourselves. So that was the birth of Future Nation Schools.
And then, of course, I also noticed you did another qualification with Stanford on innovation and entrepreneurship. And again, that's another theme that cuts across your whole life. And your talk at the Nelson Mandela University also featured a lot around in innovation and entrepreneurship. How important is that, especially to the girl child? Because I want us to link it back to the girl with dreams. Because I think that's a very powerful way to frame this conversation.
You know, I always had dreams, and my dreams were around showing the world that an African is equal to the best. 1. 2, my dreams were always supported by education. Like you said earlier on, I've studied every decade of my life because I know the value of education. Over and above empowering your mind, you meet people. And you know, they say it's not only what you know, but it's also who you know. And you make these networks and you meet like-minded people. And a small thing that you try and do for a society can be so much bigger because of the linkages that you have. Now, when it comes to entrepreneurship, I wanted to teach entrepreneurship at a business school. Actually, when I was approached for the chancellorship, I said, I'm talking to another university because I would like to teach. And and that's why I went for that certificate, because I said, I've lived this journey, but I also need to have the education side of things when it comes to it. And why entrepreneurship? Because if you look at our country, if you look at the continent, actually, it's mainly youth. and that's going to increase over time.
Yeah.
And you look at our country, the most highly unemployed group is the youth. And when you look at our education, it doesn't prepare our youth for being their own bosses, for starting their own companies. We prepare them to go looking for a job. So the power that is waiting for the continent and for the country is for the young person to have an education that tells him or her, especially she, that you can start your own thing. You need that mindset inculcated from early childhood, which is what we try and do at Future Nation schools. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to SMMEs, that is where our salvation is. And as we know, the people that start businesses and become multinationals, it's not just because they are clever. Yes, it helps, but they have to take risk. They need support. They need markets to open up for them. One of the things that I'm investigating now is what are those key enablers in a society that the SMMEs thrive and we get more Adrian Gores who look like me, right? Because when you look even the story of discovery, when you look at Adrian Gore, he got support. There was the Laurie Dipinar and the R&B team that backed him, you know. So we need that. And you find that we started something, Black Founders Forum, which are young Black entrepreneurs who actually were with McKinsey's, who have the best education, but they come back home and say, I want to start something. But unless the environment is conducive and supports them, they'll fail.
So, I mean, one of the statements you say in some ways, you are not born anything, you become something. And that seems to resonate with what you are saying. I mean, obviously, a journey on entrepreneurship also involves so many challenges and even failures. And I think you have also talked about some of the successes that you have made, but also a lot of challenges that you have faced. And I want us to combine that with some of the challenges you have faced in business. Firstly, as the founder of so many of these entities, but secondly, serving in other governance structures. What would be some of those challenges if you were speaking to a young girl who also has dreams to anticipate, meeting, but also how to mitigate against them?
You know, what I would say, obviously it's based on my own experience, is that it matters to have something before you venture out. And what is that something? For me, it's education. And I do find that if you actually have a profession, right? As long as you do things the right way with integrity, you can always go back. Because failure is guaranteed, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. So it's very important for young people to understand that it's guaranteed. How you rise from that failure is what differentiates you from others. Like we started many businesses, my husband and I. Some I started on my own, and some failed. One of the businesses that we started was during those days where you would rent movies from videos, you know. We started that. Oh my goodness, that was a disaster. And that's a story for another day. And then I supported somebody else starting their own business that I had no clue about. But I thought, oh, I'll support another African woman. And things went pear-shaped. I had to take over. But I had so many other babies, you know. And that type of business requires your full attention. So I tried nursing the other babies, and it didn't work out. But the beauty is that I was able to sell it to someone that could make it work. So there are always different ways out. But to a young person, this is the message that's more important than any other thing. integrity. Don't sell your soul for money, for fame, or anything, because the only thing you have is your name, and it has to be clean. People have to trust you because they know you have integrity. It worries me to see where we are as a country, where leaders from different sectors, business included, because we tend to focus on government and how the leaders are failing. We forget that the corruption that we have in this country, you can't do it alone as government. Business funds this corruption and fuels it. So it becomes difficult, Becky, when you're raising young people to say crime doesn't pay, because right now it pays.
It pays, yeah.
But the challenge and the message to the young person is that it might pay,
but
for a short time.
Yeah.
But look at Dr. Nandi now.
Yeah.
What's happening? You know, so okay, you'll drive those fancy Porsches and Ferraris, but then they go back to where they belong because they were never yours.
Yeah.
But when you work hard, no matter how long it takes, it's yours.
Yeah.
You know, there are no skeletons in the cupboard. And please, if you can just remember that, don't sell your soul for anything.
Yeah.
When you fail as an entrepreneur and you have your certificate, it's okay to go back and use that certificate and reorganize your life and maybe get partners who get it, because it's not everyone who's made out to be an entrepreneur. It's okay also to have a corporate life, you know, as long as we understand that.
Yeah. And then in the governance space, because I mean governance has been such a key issue, even with the introduction of the different mechanisms, your king codes and many others, we still see that governance is a big issue. Some of the big institutions, state enterprises and others are crumbling simply because of governance issues.
Exactly.
But you've been serving on so many of these big institutions, either as the chairperson or non-executive directors. What would be some of the key elements of governance that we should be paying attention to today?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that's very important is that even when you agree to be a non-executive director, even when you agree to be a chairman, just make sure that the organization that you serve in that position has an alignment of values with your values. Because many times you find that a young person is attracted to these positions and they take whatever comes, and then you have challenges because things are not done according to book in that organization, and it affects you. Excuse me. So the important thing is always deal with companies, with people that have an alignment of values with you, and always do your homework. When you serve on that board, question. Don't just go there to tick the box and do whatever. And when you realize that one, your opinions are not respected, or you don't feel like you're serving a purpose, resign. You know? And it doesn't matter that you will be forfeiting a salary.
Yes, some remuneration of some sort.
Exactly. Just resign.
Yeah.
So you don't have to stay in a position because it pays your bills. And I always say this to young people, especially those that are employed by corporates. When you realize that things are not working out, look for another job while you still have a job, because it's very difficult to find a job when you don't have one. So you need to be strategic in everything that you do. Find the job, then resign. Because sometimes you find that some institutions are very racist, especially for women. You'll find that you reach a ceiling, and it doesn't matter what you do, qualifications, you deliver, you're not going to break that ceiling. Then look for something else. Look for somewhere else where your skills and your delivery will be recognized for what it's worth. So I think we need to manage our careers ourselves. There is no magic. You manage it, and you manage it strategically. And at every turn, you make sure that you don't sell your soul,
Yeah.
and you are able to go back to your maker, whoever he is, and say, I did my best and I didn't cut corners.
Yeah.
You know?
Staying with the theme of education, I don't think we concluded the part of the teaching qualification.
Oh yes, okay, okay. Here is the
I'm
thing.
I'm still intrigued.
Intrigued by that.
Yeah.
Okay, here is the thing. You know, one of the things that drive everything that I do is to try and understand it, right? So you've invested your retirement money, my husband and I, in this. The best thing you can do is to understand it, the core of what drives it. What drives education? It's teachers,
Yeah.
right? And how do you empower people if you don't understand their journey? Become one of them.
Yeah.
Understand how they are trained, and I tell you, Becky, now I get it. How they are trained, and because they are going to teach your kids,
Yeah.
the product of FNS comes back to my family. It's a reflection of who we are, right? And that matters. It matters a lot.
Yeah.
It's more important than any other thing that you can do. So become a teacher. Sizwe does teach. I don't, but I understand
Yeah.
the teaching.
Yeah.
When I go there and observe, I know what I'm looking for. And maybe I'll teach one or two
Yeah.
courses
Yeah.
later on. But what I've discovered is just the many gaps in the way
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
train our teachers.
Yeah.
They're huge, and that's part of the challenge. That is why we'll now have a college
Yeah.
that will train teachers.
Teachers, yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
we had to go through it. to
Yourselves, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you start the college, you know the gaps, so you fill the gaps. So I think the message is always come from a point of knowledge.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to get in to understand
Yeah.
where the gaps
Yeah.
are and what
Yeah.
you're working towards. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah.
we
And so maybe the simple message to young people is don't do anything if you don't understand it. So you have to actually be trained and,
Yeah.
you know,
maybe tweak it.
yeah.
Sometimes you'll have an opportunity and you'll say, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
It's actually interesting because I think it was the late Eric Mlo who actually asked me to sit on the board of Northam.
Yeah.
And I said, but Eric, I know nothing about mining. And he's like, you've done occupational health,
Yeah.
you did Mining Act, but now, unless you get in, you'll never know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to say to young people, if there's an opportunity, look at what you already know, how much you can apply,
Yeah.
but please run to understand it better.
Yeah.
Because when we started the schools, we were not teachers,
Yeah.
we're not trained as such, but we knew that we actually will do
Yeah.
something about
Yeah.
it. So I don't want to constrain them
Yeah.
to say unless you don't, you know,
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Get in and then empower
then
yourself with.
I mean, using that same theme, if we come into philanthropy, a lot of philanthropy just does things without what you are describing, which is you really need to go to the people, you need to go to the ground,
Yeah.
understand, and then you can channel your resources
Oh, yeah.
effectively. So that message also applies to philanthropies, and I don't know what your experience has been personally, but also looking at how philanthropy is practiced.
I have a very interesting story around that because we have Sizwe comes from Ngagubana, and when his grandfather passed away, he passed on the farm to him, which has a lot of families, and one of the things that he had done is to donate land and also work with the community to build a school, right? So when we got this responsibility, because it's a farm, but not a productive one. So what does it mean? You have a responsibility to that community. He has started something. We have to continue where he left off. So that is one of the communities that we support.
Yeah.
But we then had to go and say, what is it that you need? How can we work with you to make a difference in the community? It's very impoverished.
Yeah.
And they told us what they needed, and we did something about it. And it's actually interesting. I'll only choose one out of the many things that we've tried with them without getting the success that we thought we would. I'll choose the school.
Yeah.
So one of the things that sets a lot of urban schools apart is access to technology, Google, being able to do your research on a computer. And we're like, okay, fine. We'll buy computers, we'll have a computer room, we'll have a library. Great. We install the computers, we get a network from them, and obviously you have to pay for this. It's great. But each time we visit, the computers are covered.
Yeah.
The room is very clean. Okay, they're not using them. So we employed an IT teacher that now actually takes every class to teach them on the computer. They do research, she assists, and a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is, you know how cameras come and the private sector is actually
cut the ribbon and
cut the ribbon.
Yeah.
Oh wow, beautiful computers, then they are gone.
Yeah.
Do they come back to see if they are being used? Do they give them the capacity to have the network, to be functional, to have maintenance of those computers or what have you? That's what we do. And there we have learned lessons. So they know if there's a problem with computers, there is maintenance for them. But more importantly, every class has a session in the computer room because there's a teacher who's employed just for that. So philanthropy is not only about money. It's about understanding the need on the ground, serving that need, and staying with the community.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then to me, that is proper philanthropy.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a good way to pivot to our last segment, which is on philanthropy. And one of the things that you also, in many ways, ascribe back to your parents is the whole notion of giving.
Oh, yeah.
You describe that your parents were givers themselves. Your father, you describe his giving. Your mother used to teach in the evenings. So maybe let's talk about how the two impacted on you, the values around giving.
It's a way of life.
Yeah.
That's what you do. When you are blessed with anything, you actually pass it on. My dad had a Section 10A. Young people wouldn't understand those things. But what it meant, because he had property, amongst other things, that then enabled him to be seen as a better native, if you like. Because of that, he then used that to clear people who were looking for a job. So he would say he had a small painting contracting company, and he would say, these are my employees, and then get a special permit for them so that they would not be arrested. And he didn't do it for money. You know, those people would come with a chicken to say, oh, Dlamini siyabonga. You know, and I looked at this, and my mother would teach at night school domestic workers that didn't know how to read or write. And she got the kick out of it that she's changed their lives.
Yeah.
So that's what I grew up to. And my dad used to write, there was a newsletter in Westville, in the area where we stayed, and he used to write the Zulu side of things to make sure that the domestics can also read the newsletter on the things that are happening, not for money. So I think it's important how we raise our kids, not so much what we tell them, but how we live our lives. Because I don't think my parents said, you must give.
Yeah.
They just lived their life. And they didn't say you must hustle and have many streams of income. They lived it. And that's the best lesson that you can teach your kids. living your life,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And then, so some of your initiatives in the philanthropic space would include, for example, the Female Academic Leaders Fellowship. And before we came on set, we were talking about some of the successes. Would you maybe talk about some of the key successes so far, what it is firstly, and also some of the successes? And again, it stays in the theme of education.
Yeah, you know, as I said, the things that have made me who I am are the things that drive what I do. I saw someone who looked like me being something, therefore I became. So I looked at, if you look at the statistics now, when it comes to girls, anywhere in the world, junior degree, honors degree, 60% girls. Now, how are we making sure that those girls look at someone that they can model their careers around? If you look at universities, 26 of them, if you read the Ministerial Task Team report of 2020, black women don't show up there. They are not professors, they are not deans of faculties, they are not heads of schools. That has to change. And how do you change it? Not by complaining. Okay, there are people who complain. Great, they make the change. I don't complain. I say, what can I do? So that motivated me to start Female Academic Leaders Fellowship. And I said, which group is neglected when it comes to progression in their careers at universities? And it's African and women of mixed African descent. So that is the group. And you know, what excites me is that our aspiration was that in 5 years we'll have at least 100. And these fellows, it's not just a grant and then they go and do whatever. It's a community. Once you become a fellow, you empower others. There's peer-to-peer empowerment of others. But also, one of the key things for us, you keep the grant as long as you stay within academia, because the objective is to change the knowledge producers in the country, but also the leaders within the academic space. So people are progressing, we're excited. Some have become associate professors, senior lecturers, but more importantly, the research. We had our first research symposium October last year, and the research that they are doing just makes you realize that the area that a woman, especially a black woman, will find as a problem that needs to be solved tends to be relevant for the country and that community. So I really feel in that area we will deliver quite a bit in terms of changing the status quo.
In fact, as we were talking, I just realized that there is a very good link with what several years ago the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa, COTESRIA, based in Senegal, actually had a very interesting debate and struggle to develop a gender program of academics continentally. And it was women scholars like Amina Mama and others who actually pushed for that. And there's a whole literature around that, which is fascinating, and it actually dovetails with what you are saying.
Can you pass that to me, please?
I will actually send you some articles as well, and potentially link you with the ES there.
That would be great, because my ambition, Becky, is that we become continental. Start in South Africa, and even the diaspora. So for me, I'd love to see African women scholars all over the world behaving as sisters, collaborating on research, things that matter to us. COVID, I like talking about things that I'm passionate about. You know, with COVID, initially they wouldn't give the race of the people that were dying. And in this country, in the US, blacks were dying the most. Why? Because we have different circumstances over and above the poverty, this, that, and the other. We're just different. So when the research companies test a drug, as an example, it will be tested in the West in Caucasian humans. And that will be, this is what it does, and it will be given to other groups.
Yeah.
But we are different. We are similar but different when it comes to our DNA and so forth. So we need to change that. And women have the power and the capacity and the love for changing things for their people.
Yeah.
So we need research on us before we can say it works for us.
In fact, most changes and transformations in the world are actually linked to women's struggles.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to learn from women's movements actually when it comes to ways and techniques of changes. And then there's the Mkiwa Trust. What does it do? What have been some of the successes and challenges?
Successes. Mkiwa Trust is about bursaries. We started off funding CAs. My husband is involved with the BASA and Tutuka bursary fund. And Tutuka has done amazing things. So there are students that are funded by Mkiwa Trust that will become CAs. We have quite a lot that have become CAs, but also when it comes to doctors, when it comes to actuaries, and different, later on, we opened it up to people that actually have potential but haven't got the means. So that's one of the things it does. But also it's the project at Ngakubana, the one that's looking at the community, where we actually make sure that there is payment for the administrator, the IT person, the computers, and so forth. So when it comes to community development, we use Mkiwa Trust. So
And then there's the Sifiso Community Center.
Yes, the Sifiso Community Center, we haven't been as successful as we wanted. We traveled for a year trying to find out how we can assist the community. So we built the community center, great, but we wanted more than that. So we got people to train them on skills like using wood, using beads to do craft work. Actually, if I can show you in the office some work that was done from that project. And we then said, we want to train you to be able to do your own thing, but also open markets for you.
Right.
So we got someone who was taking the products to the markets to sell for them. But, we've been socialized to think we must get a job for someone to pay us and/or the grant. You know, if you go to the rural areas now, people are about the grant, doing zero drinking. You know, it's sad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Someone would say, that's a snotty thought. Just go to your roots and tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because people talk a lot and they hardly ever go back to where they
To
came
see what's
from
going on,
to see, right? They were like, no, they actually need someone to pay them. So you must pay for them to be trained. You must pay someone to take to markets and also pay them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then we're not building entrepreneurs. So that was the downfall. The center is still there. It's still being used. We are now actually talking with one of the church congregations, because they have outreach programs, to actually collaborate with them to do the outreach programs, because there's also land they can use for planting and what have you. Yeah, so that hasn't been the way you would have wanted to
and then, of course, I think we are landing here, but I wanted to land on another very positive note, which is about you being an author. You know, so some of your works include Grow to Be Great, Equal but Different, The Other Story. What is the main theme in all of your writings?
You know, I have to say this before I answer that directly. Ali Mafruki.
Yes.
We both know him.
Yeah.
An amazing African.
Yeah.
May his soul rest in peace. In The Other Story, he's one of the stories that I share. because my experience determines how I live my life. You may not meet Ali.
Yeah.
He's gone now, but his story stays, lives beyond him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What does it do for an African child? It says, I can, because he was.
Yeah.
So my stories are about telling an African child, boy or girl, that it is possible. If these people who look like you could do it, so can you. The last one is the Doctor of Hearts.
Yeah.
And that is on Professor Bongani Mayosi.
Yes.
And that one, I said when I'm in pain or I have grief or I'm angry, I channel it
Yes.
positively.
Yeah.
When I buried him on the 4th of August, 2018, I was angry. I was very angry. He was 50.
Yeah.
And my goodness, we still wanted to
More.
achieve so much
Yeah.
through him.
Yeah.
He made us look good. I was like, I'll tell his story if nothing else.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then maybe some doctors will, or any other profession for that matter, will say, he did, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the Bhekinkosi group has been going on for more than 25 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last statistics I saw, you employ more than 120 women.
Yeah. 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 Actually,
that's amazing.
no, thank you. Thank you. You know, when we started with Mbegani Health. Now there's Property and others. But with Mbegani Health, it was professional nurses and people within the space of sterilization of surgical instruments within a hospital. And I said, I'm not going to employ a single man. Not because I have anything against men. I'm married and I have a son who's late, obviously. But because I want the women themselves to believe that we are enough. We can do anything ourselves, for ourselves. First 5 years, no man. After 5 years, I was like, guys, we've proved
We
the
made
point.
a point, yeah.
We've made a point. Now men can come in. I really believe that, Bheki, because if I was just to talk to young men and women, I think if we are to have strong relationships and strong families, therefore strong nations, we individually have to believe that we are complete in our own skin and our capabilities. And when we come together as partners, we actually are even better. 1 + 1 becomes 3, you know, because I want our sons to see our daughters as equal, capable human beings. When they marry them, if they choose to marry them, they're not marrying them to serve them, but they are marrying them to have a partnership that will deliver and make this society a better society. I really think we need more that inculcated. You know, they say when they raise us, they say you must learn how to cook because you'll cook for your husband. No, yes, you'll cook for your husband, but he'll also cook for you. But you're learning for your own self and then the other people. So I really think we need more conversations around that.
Yeah. So let's end by going back to the little girl with big dreams. What are the next dreams for the next decade?
The next decade, I'm not saying. But more studying. You know, I was reading an article, someone saying, you know, these people who are in retirement, which I'm supposed to be because I'm above 60, they actually just do a PhD for the fun of it. It never is for the fun of it. Something comes out of it, you know. So, I'll let you know once I'm able, but I remain ambitious.
I take that as an invitation for us to come back again, because there are
Definitely
so many issues. There are so many issues that we did not cover. For example, your many awards, which I think what we'll do with the team is to find a way of incorporating them in the conversation, because I would do you know, injustice if I were to start recounting them now. But thank you so much, Ma'am Judy, for hosting us and having this conversation. It's so exciting, but also empowering, especially for the young women and even men in this particular context, in the context of Africa, but the country. There are so many challenges that are facing, people politically, economically, and otherwise. And I think such messages and examples, such as yourselves and your partner, who we did not talk about, are really empowering. So I really want to take this opportunity to thank you immensely for this conversation.
I want to thank you. I really want to thank you for what you do. It's not just about the philanthropy. You actually saying we are here as Africans, and this is who we are, and this is what we do. And for that, I am so grateful. Even the storytelling that you actually launched not so long ago.
Yeah, the Kisima, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And my wish is that you just grow worldwide, because we have Africans all over the globe.
Yeah.
And we just need that visibility. We need that affirmation that what you've been doing, we did that before you started.
Yeah.
Because there is this belief that Africans don't give, we actually need to look to the West. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
But then that's what you remind us.
Yeah. But also there's the team, the colleagues here, Tandy and others from the center. There is actually another program which they might want to find some time to talk to you about, which is Women in Philanthropy.
Okay.
It's a new program because we also want to make sure that we pay attention to that specific field, which over time, it shares the history with, with all other fields in terms of the participation of women, their position. But over time, we're beginning to see it opening. But what does that mean for them? So that's another program that I think the team will probably find some time and talk to.
I'm happy that you're young, so you have so many decades to continue doing this. Some of us are closer to where we're going.
We should say that in front of the team because they don't think I'm young.
It's all relative, guys. It's all relative. So you really have my quiet support.
Yes, we do know.
And I tell you, and we admire what you do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
On that note, thank you for watching this episode. That was our conversation with Dr. Judy Dlamini, currently the Chancellor of the Wits University. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.